Chief Justice John Roberts didn't see it coming. In a courtroom packed with silence and eyes watching, he tried to put Denzel Washington on the spot. Maybe he thought Denzel was just another actor, someone who should smile, speak his lines, and stay out of legal talk. But what happened next left the whole room stunned. Roberts asked a question, calm on the outside but clearly meant to test Denzel, maybe even embarrass him. But instead of folding, Denzel leaned forward, looked right at him, and gave an answer that flipped everything upside down. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, but it hit hard, like someone dropping the truth right in the middle of the room. You could feel the shift, like even Roberts wasn't sure what to say next. What started as a setup turned into something no one expected, and if you think Denzel couldn't handle a Supreme Court Chief Justice, think again. Before we get into how it all unfolded, hit that subscribe button because what you're about to hear might just change how you see both of them. The courtroom was quiet, almost too quiet, the kind of silence where you can hear every breath, every chair squeak, every small shift in the room. The walls were high, polished, and cold. Everything about the space felt serious, heavy wood, tall chairs, and long stairs. This wasn't a movie set. This was real. And sitting right in the middle of it all was Denzel Washington. He wasn't there to act. He wasn't reading lines. He had been invited to speak at a legal panel, something about justice, public voice, and truth in the system. Some people thought it was a nice gesture. Others thought he didn't belong there. But Denzel sat straight, calm, dressed sharp as always, eyes focused. Across from him sat Chief Justice John Roberts. Neatly dressed, sharp-eyed, with a face that didn't show much emotion. He had the kind of presence that made people sit up straighter. Everyone knew who he was, the highest judge in the land, respected, powerful. But today there was something in his voice. He wasn't just asking questions. He was testing Denzel. Not loud, not rude, but the tone had weight. Like he didn't think Denzel had any business sitting at that table. Like he was ready to prove a point, and the room could feel it. Justice Roberts sat forward, hands clasped, eyes steady on Denzel. The room felt tighter now, like everyone was leaning in just a little. You could almost feel what was coming. He cleared his throat, not to be polite, but to signal that something important was about to be said. Then, in a calm and measured voice, he asked the question. "Mr. Washington, with all due respect, what qualifies an entertainer to speak on matters of constitutional law?" He didn't raise his voice, he didn't smirk, but the question itself did the work. It landed with a certain weight. You could hear the unspoken message behind it. You're not one of us. This isn't your lane. It wasn't just a question, it was a challenge. One designed to make Denzel shrink, to remind him that he was just a visitor in this space built for judges and legal minds. For a moment, no one spoke. Some eyes shifted to Denzel, others stayed locked on Roberts. A few people blinked like they couldn't believe he said that out loud. It wasn't aggressive, but it was clear. This was a test, a kind of polite push meant to put Denzel in his place. And the way Roberts asked it, slow, almost casual, made it even sharper, like he wasn't expecting a real answer. Maybe he thought Denzel would fumble, say something vague about justice or personal opinion. Maybe he thought he'd smile and deflect like actors do when they're out of their depth. But Denzel didn't speak right away. He just looked at Roberts, calm and still. No panic in his face, no flinch. The question was meant to cut him down, to remind him that courtrooms were for lawyers, not movie stars. But instead of folding, Denzel just listened, really listened. And in that silence, you could feel it. This wasn't going the way Roberts thought it would. Denzel leaned forward just a little, still calm, still quiet. He didn't rush. He didn't raise his voice or try to sound smarter than anyone else. He just spoke like someone who had spent time thinking, really thinking, about what justice means, not just in books, but in real life. He looked at Roberts and said, "With respect, Your Honor, the Constitution doesn't come with a warning label that says for judges only. It was written for the people, by the people." His tone was steady, like someone telling a simple truth. You don't need to wear a robe to care about the rights it protects. The room stayed silent. Nobody moved. Denzel continued. One of the first things I ever read about the law was the case of Gideon versus Wainwright, a man with no money, no lawyer, standing in court alone, and yet he changed the system for millions of others. Not because he was powerful, but because he knew something wasn't right. He paused for a moment and looked down, then back at Roberts. I've spent my life studying people. That's what actors do. And when you study people long enough, you start to see patterns. About power, about silence, about who gets to speak and who doesn't. I don't stand here claiming to be a lawyer, but I am a citizen. And the law is not some private club, it's the promise this country made to all of us. He didn't sound angry. He sounded like someone who cared too much to stay quiet. And even though his words were simple, they hit hard. He spoke in a way that didn't feel like a speech. It felt real, honest. And suddenly, this actor, sitting in front of the highest judge in the land, didn't seem out of place at all. He looked like he belonged. Justice Roberts didn't smile. He didn't nod or offer any sign that he was impressed. If anything, his face tightened. Maybe Denzel's answer got to him. Maybe it wasn't what he expected. But instead of backing off, Roberts went deeper. He leaned back slightly, then spoke with a sharper tone. "All right then, Mr. Washington," he said, voice low but direct. "If you say the Constitution belongs to everyone, then tell me, how should we interpret the separation of powers in today's political climate? Should the people decide that too?" It wasn't just a question. It was a curveball, loaded with terms meant to trip someone up, the kind of thing law students struggle with, the kind of thing that takes years of study. Roberts wasn't just asking for Denzel's opinion. He was daring him to fail. There was something in his look, an eyebrow, slightly raised, lips pressed together, that said, "Let's see how far your passion takes you now." The room shifted again. You could feel people turning in their seats. This wasn't just a panel discussion anymore. This was a real challenge, one aimed right at the heart of Denzel's place at that table. The message behind the question was clear. Passion isn't the same as knowledge, and Roberts wanted to prove it. It was the kind of moment where most people would stumble, or at least hesitate. And for a second it looked like Roberts had taken back control. He had moved the conversation from the heart to the head, from values to rules. And he was watching closely, waiting for Denzel to slip. What he didn't expect was that Denzel had more than just heart. He had done his homework. And this story was far from over. Denzel sat still for a moment. He didn't rush to speak, didn't try to match the technical tone Roberts had just used. He let the room breathe. Then, with the same calm voice he'd used from the start, he answered, not like someone in a debate, but like someone telling a story that mattered. He said, "That's a fair question, Your Honor. Separation of powers exists to keep any one branch from becoming too strong. But history shows us something else too. Real change has always started outside those branches. It's come from people who saw injustice and spoke up, even when they didn't have titles or power." He looked around the room for a second before continuing. Back in 1954, when Brown versus Board of Education was decided, it wasn't just about what the Constitution said. It was about what kids felt, black kids being told they were less than. And the court finally said, no, that's not equal. But that case only got there because parents, teachers, and regular people wouldn't stay quiet. They weren't legal experts, but they knew something was wrong. Denzel's tone deepened, slow but certain. You don't need a robe to know what justice feels like. You need a conscience, a working heart. And sometimes the most honest view of power comes from the ones who live under it, not the ones who write the rules. He didn't throw big words around. He didn't try to sound like a professor. He just told the truth in a way that everyone could feel. He made a technical legal idea sound like something real, something human. And that was the moment the room changed. People inside the courtroom leaned in. Some judges lowered their pens. Even the air felt different, like everyone was finally hearing something they didn't expect, but couldn't ignore. Roberts didn't speak right away, maybe because for the first time in that room, he wasn't sure what to say. Denzel hadn't dodged the question. He hadn't gotten lost in the details. He had gone straight to the heart of the matter and made it impossible to dismiss. It wasn't just smart. It was powerful. And now it was clear, he didn't just belong at that table. He owned it. The room was still, but something had shifted. You could see it in the way people sat. Some leaned forward without realizing it. Others glanced at each other with raised brows as if silently asking, "Did he just say that?" There were no loud gasps, no clapping, just a quiet wave of respect spreading through the space. A clerk near the back started scribbling faster. Another one tapped her pen on the desk, then stopped, eyes locked on Denzel. Even a few of the junior judges, those usually stiff and unreadable, nodded slightly. It was the kind of reaction that said he made sense, even if no one said it out loud. Robert stayed quiet. He blinked a little more than usual, then adjusted his glasses with a careful hand. His face was calm like always, but something in his jaw had tightened. He wasn't angry. He was thinking. You could tell he hadn't expected that kind of answer. Not from someone outside the legal world. Not from a man he'd likely seen more on screen than in serious policy rooms. One older man in the back row gave the smallest of smiles. It was quick, gone before anyone could really notice. But it was there. Another leaned over and whispered something to the person next to him. Nothing loud. Just a few words, maybe a simple, "That was good." Before they both turned their eyes back to Denzel, there wasn't applause. That wasn't the kind of room this was. But the silence spoke louder than noise. It was full of weight, like everyone in that courtroom had just seen something important. Denzel hadn't just answered the question. He had changed the room. Even Roberts, proud and composed, had to sit with what he'd heard. For the first time since this started, it didn't feel like a courtroom versus an outsider. It felt like a conversation that mattered, and Denzel had earned his place in it. Roberts took a breath, the kind you take when you need a second to collect your thoughts. He didn't smile. He didn't frown either. But the sharp edge in his voice was gone. He looked at Denzel, this time not like someone questioning him, but like someone trying to understand him. After a short pause, Roberts leaned forward slightly and said, "I respect your perspective, Mr. Washington." Just that. No praise, no agreement, just a simple line. But it carried weight. Because for someone like Roberts, who rarely gives ground, even that was something. He didn't follow it up with another question. He didn't try to win back the room. He just adjusted the papers in front of him, almost like he needed something to do with his hands. That tight control he always had? It had loosened, even if just a little. The power in the room had shifted. Not because Roberts said Denzel was right, but because he stopped pushing. The air between them wasn't tense anymore. It was quiet, even respectful. Robert's tone, once firm and slightly cold, now carried something else. Recognition. He looked down briefly, then said, "Public conversations like this are important. It's clear you've thought deeply about these matters." Another soft line, another sign that this wasn't the battle Roberts expected it to be. The way he spoke now, it wasn't defensive, but it wasn't dominant either. He wasn't surrendering. Judges like him don't do that. But he was retreating, just enough to show that Denzel had earned his space, and everyone in the room saw it. Denzel didn't gloat. He didn't smirk or lean back in victory. He stayed steady, listening, calm. That alone made the moment stronger. The respect he'd claimed wasn't taken by force. It was given, even if silently. And just like that, a room that had started with one man holding all the power now felt different. The titles were still the same, but the ground had leveled. Denzel had done more than answer a question. He had made the judge listen. Denzel pauses, his gaze steady, making sure his words land. He doesn't need to raise his voice, yet every syllable feels weighty. He talks about justice, but not in the way you'd expect from someone in a courtroom. He reminds everyone that justice isn't just for those in power or those with titles like judge or lawyer. It's something each of us carries, just by being human. With sincerity, he says, I don't need to be a judge to care about justice. I just need to be human. His words are simple, but the meaning cuts through. He's reminding the audience that no matter who we are, we all have a responsibility to speak up when things aren't right. We all have a voice, and that voice matters. Whether it's standing up for someone who's being treated unfairly or just showing up for what's right, we all play a part in creating a more just world. His eyes move from the bench, where the judges sit, to the camera, making direct contact with the viewer. It's as if he's not just speaking to the room, but to every person watching. The message is clear. Justice is for all of us, and it's something we all should care about. We don't need a title or a position to do what's right. All we need is the courage to speak out, to stand for fairness, and to be human. Denzel gives one last, knowing look. The weight of his words hangs in the air, leaving everyone in the room and everyone watching with something to think about. The narrator's voice is calm, almost like a quiet thought you can't ignore. In a courtroom meant to silence him, Denzel reminded us what real authority looks like. It's a simple line, but it carries a lot of weight. The image of a place meant to enforce silence, but instead being a space where one person's voice rises above the rest, stays with you. It makes you think about how often we let titles or positions decide who gets to speak the truth. How many times do we ignore someone just because they don't fit the mold of authority? The narrator pauses for a moment, giving the viewer space to think. How often do we let titles define truth? It's not just a question for the characters in the story, it's a question for everyone watching. It gets you wondering about your own life. How many times have you let someone's title or position make you doubt your own voice? The music fades in softly, guiding you into the final thought, and the narrator closes with, sometimes, brilliance doesn't wear a robe. Sometimes it just walks in with confidence. With that, the screen slowly fades to black, leaving you thinking long after the words are gone. It's a reminder that power and truth aren't always about what you wear or what you're called. They come from within.